Well, I think we need all kinds of people. We talk about diversity actively in our business because we recognize that people with all kind of attributes can bring something to our organization. There's a place for everybody. The things I look for is a real willingness to learn, great energy, a great work ethic, and ambition and imagination. I think those things are fantastic in young people, and certainly the ones that we bring on board into our business display those in spades.
On today's episode of Careers Unwrapped, excited to have here Nick Turner, who's a distinguished leader in financial services industry, particularly around insurance. And as the Group Chief Executive Officer at NFU Mutual, he's bringing over 3 decades now of expertise in board and executive roles. His work's also helped shape organizations like the Chartered Insurance Institute and the Personal Finance Society. So today with Nick, hopefully he's going to share his journey through the financial services sector, discuss, I hope, the evolution of his own leadership style within that, and also offer some invaluable advice for the next generation looking to make their own mark in this wide-ranging industry. So Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I just throw a slight curveball of a question out first of all. Insurance, what's the most extraordinary thing or event that you've seen as a claim?
Well, normally claims are pretty serious, and people are usually in quite a distressed situation. They've lost something, or something's burned down, or in some cases, people have died. So it can be quite a serious moment where people need help. But you do get occasions where there is an element of humor to be found. And a good example was a Welsh family who were having their Christmas dinner, which is topical. We're talking about this in the middle of December, just coming into Christmas. And a goat had fallen off the mountain behind their house and come through their conservatory and was dancing up and down the Christmas table, throwing all the turkey and trimmings left, right, and center. Took some time for them to wrestle it to the ground. Probably ruined their Christmas day a bit, but of course we get the phone call pretty swiftly afterwards saying, "What about my conservatory?" But you do have humorous causes occasionally where things that could go wrong can have funny beginnings.
Were they obliged to provide evidence of said goat?
Well, I'm sure they had plenty of photographs.
Now, you mentioned there insurance is often a product used at a point of distress. So it's something in many cases we're obliged to buy. So vehicle, car insurance. And some cases we think it's very sensible to buy health insurance, travel insurance, but we don't really want to use it. But what would a world be like if we didn't have insurance? Why is it so important to the way we go about our lives?
I think the reason it's so important is because if a risk becomes an issue, in other words, something that might go wrong does go wrong, many people can't actually afford the consequences of that event. So what that does is that creates a volatile life. It means that people have disasters that can leave them completely bankrupt on the poverty line because they can't afford to repair something that's happened to them. And insurance is a mechanism that for a relatively small premium allows you to share that risk with many other people and provide, well, it's cash effectively, a cash and support that means that a disaster that could be devastating for your whole life might not be so. In other words, it can be modified. So it's just to bring that into life. I mean, we see, hundreds of events that are dreadful. But if you drive into somebody and you injure them for the rest of their life, they need care and attention. Apart from you feeling awful that you've done it, they need care and attention for the rest of their life, and that could be millions in terms of cost. And that would devastate your life because you couldn't afford that amount of money. And it would devastate their life because they wouldn't have the money to provide that care and support. So in fact, insurance, that's where your mandatory car insurance comes from. It makes sure that you can carry on living your life even when something horrible like that happens. But more importantly, the damage that's been done to this third party person can also be afforded, and they can live a life that is as best they can after a disastrous event. So insurance helps make disasters less of disasters.
And the way you're describing it there with insurance, vehicle insurance in particular, all of us are chipping in a few £100s into a huge pool of money with the aim that only a small number will need to be paid out larger sums of money. So we're all basically sharing in protecting all of us. And I'm interested then in the origins of the organization you run, because NFU is a mutual, and people may not know what that actually means. So what differentiates as a mutual, and what are the heritage, the origins of that with NFU?
Well, our heritage, it describes mutuality very simply because, back in 1910, there were 7 farmers who were living around Stratford-on-Avon, which is where our head office is now. And they were trying to get some insurance for their haystacks. And of course, their disaster would have been if their haystacks burned down, they wouldn't have bedding or feed or whatever it was for their animals. And so that would have been a relatively huge disaster for them. So they wanted to insure it, but they had also built their haystacks next to the London Stratford main railway line, which back in those days in 1910 was smokestacks coming out of steam engines. And the insurers of the day basically said, we're not insuring that because it looks too risky. It's not a risk, it's an issue. It's going to happen. You are going to burn down. And the farmers said, well, we don't believe you. We think it is a risk and it's actually one that is insurable. And so if you won't insure us, we'll set up our own insurance company. And so they sat around a table in a tea shop in the middle of Stratford and built their own insurance company. And they decided that they, as insurers, as members of their insurance company, would own their own insurance company. And they said that anybody else who joins, in other words, who pays premiums into this pool, will be a joint owner of the insurance company too. And that's what a mutual is. So instead of issuing shares on a limited company basis where people buy and they look for a dividend, members of an insurance company, a mutual insurance company, just contribute to the pool and there's no profit to be paid away to shareholders. It's a very simple structure in that regard. And that's the way we are today. We're just, instead of being 7 farmers, we're now thousands. We've got over 1.1 million customers and £2.5 billion in premium coming in to our insurance company.
And how much are you still centered around farmers and farming?
Well, we're very much centered around the rural community. So it's more than just farming. If you were to push me, I'd say just about 50% of our premium is farming related in some way, shape or form. So, but farmers these days have diversified. They're no longer, they just involved in food production. Many of them have glamping or farm shops, or even do bed and breakfasts, those sort of things. So a lot of them are moving into power generation these days with solar panels and wind turbines. And so we as we insure these people, we have to look at the risks of these new ventures that they go into and insure them as well. So we are expanding as the farming community expands. And as I say, we look at the rural community as well. So we insure a huge swathe of the rural businesses and customers that live in the rural countryside too.
And so a farmer who has mainly used their land for crops comes to you and says, actually, as part of my diversifying, I'm now going to run a music and food festival, 5,000 people turning up every 2 years. How do you calculate what changes that makes to the way that they insure themselves?
Well, there are some things like that particular example, which are actually a specialist risk. So if you think about the idea of a pool of insurance, you can't just throw everything into that pool, because people need to be able to understand the risk and they need to offset it against similar risks elsewhere. And the particular one that you're talking about, where you're running a Glastonbury or some other kind of festival on a farm, if it's a pop rock concert, that would be deemed a specialist risk, and you'd have specialist insurance pools set up for that. So, we would be pointing that particular risk to people who could really assess what that risk is. Because, the other thing to bear in mind is when you're taking a risk onto our balance sheet, which is our big capital base that we because we'll have to pay out if a claim happens, we're very interested to understand what the risk is, whether it's something that's going to definitely happen, or whether it's something that might happen, or whether it's something that very rarely would happen. All those probabilities are factored in because the premium that you pay, or whether you even get into the insurance pool, will be determined by assessing that risk. So you need that specialism to really understand what you're taking on. If you think of it as your own money, if you were taking a risk on where you'd have to pay out if it went wrong, you'd be pretty interested to know exactly how that risk was being managed and how it was being reduced to its lowest possible likelihood.
And so we're starting to touch there upon types of jobs that will exist within the insurance industry. And my understanding is there's well over 300,000 people employed in insurance in the UK, but also that it is the largest insurance market in Europe. And why in the UK do we have that scale of insurance? Because we're not necessarily the largest economy in Europe, we're not necessarily the largest population in Europe, but we have this massive insurance market. Why is it here?
Well, it's not just here, but we are, as you rightly say, we are one of the biggest in the world, and it goes back to the British maritime roots. And in London, there's a fantastic modern building at Lloyd's of London, which has its origins as a coffee shop, which is where people who were taking goods from Britain to overseas, to India, or wherever they were sending their goods or receiving goods, used to look to insure the ships, because in those days, the ships were not as robust as they are today, and the weather was probably just as bad. And so people used to lose ships on the journeys. But not every ship was lost. Some ships were lost. And so there was an opportunity to create a pool that said, for those ships that are lost, we will get those insured in Lloyd's of London coffee shop. And that's exactly the way it happened. So very similar to the farming story that I gave you then. And of course, Lloyd's today has developed huge complexity in the way that it operates and places all kinds of risks, from famous film stars' legs to satellites to strange vehicles to all sorts of things can be insured through Lloyd's of London. And that specialty makes us a fantastic place to get your risk transferred from you to a corporate entity, a company.
And so if I was starting out in a career and I was interested in the insurance market, as apart from the roles and jobs that might exist, let's say in any sector, so clearly there are people involved in the marketing and call center activity, but what are the particular roles that are necessary and unique to the insurance sector, the people sort of who are making a difference, growing careers at the heart of it?
Well, I talk to a lot of young people about insurance, and I cannot believe that people don't have this as their first choice career. I'm biased, of course, but it's like an episode of EastEnders. You've got everything going on. You've got fraud, you've got death, you've got disaster, you've got everything that you could ever possibly imagine. That we employ police to deal with rural crime. We employ underwriters to try to understand risk. We employ risk management surveyors who go out and go onto farms and businesses and tell them how to reduce the likelihood of something going wrong on their business, and therefore ultimately reduce their premiums, because if the risk goes down, the premiums go down. We have people who pay claims. So there's people who write checks and help people out in their moments of need. But we also have people who go out and assess the loss. So sometimes when you've got a partial burn down of a property, the immediate question is, well, how much do you need to put it right? Well, someone needs to go out and have a look at all of this, and surveyors do that. And then we've got the issue of how much have you lost in terms of content, and people help help you realize how to quantify and replace some of the things that you've lost, and actually put the need that you have once disaster has happened against the financial cost of repairing and putting you right. So there is no end of roles like that relating to insurance. But of course, on top of that, we've got we spend this year we'll be spending 110 million on IT and change. So you can imagine we've got a large number of IT specialists, and we partner with organizations around the world to help us complete our change that we need on IT. There's compliance people, actuaries, all kinds of people who work within the fabric of the overall organization and make our business work. And in our business, we have 4,400 people who sit on the payroll, but then we also have a further 2,700 people who work out in what we have as an agency network, which are businesses that sit in the rural community and actually go and regularly visit our customers and make sure that our insurance matches the risks that they're running on their business, so that they genuinely can't be torpedoed by something that they can't see coming. They've put their insurance in place. So we talk to them about, what's happening in the claims at the moment. What are we paying out on? We make sure that they've all got these things covered. An example of a new risk that's been emerging over the recent years is cyber risk, where people are increasingly taking people's wealth and scamming them out of their wealth and assets, and talking to customers around how they can reduce that risk, and in some cases insure it. And if they do have a ransom event, for example, how do you recover from that? We're very active in helping people through those kind of disasters as well.
And so it's not just as simple as, you pay me this money, you're now insured, and then something goes wrong, I pay you more money back. It's also about advising and helping them to actually reduce that risk, so their payments come down, and also the likelihood that they will claim come down as well.
I mean, people describe insurance as a grudge purchase. So, I'd rather not buy it, but I think that's mad, because, you can only not buy insurance if you're certain you're never going to claim. And all the people that I've met who have claimed are so grateful. So if there's a chance, it shouldn't be a grudge purchase. It should be a thought through purchase.
At times, and I would emphasize this is sort of, I would say, more of a United States reputational issue sometimes. People think of insurers as you pay them the money, and then when you need to get money out, you somehow can't. You're not meeting the requirements to get a claim. What's the reality of that, and whose role is it to decide on occasion, actually, you're not getting a payment for a particular reason?
Yeah, I mean, it is an accusation that often insurers get, and that's partly why it's often considered a grudge purchase, because people think they're not going to get the claim paid. But these days, your policy wording that no one reads it. This is the trouble. The policies that you're buying describe the scenarios in which your claim will be paid. There's been a lot of regulation over the last 10, 15 years focusing on those policy documents to make them readable. But even so, you've still got to read them. And a lot of people rather don't. But they do explain very clearly what you can claim for and the circumstances in which you can claim. Now, in reality, some insurers will reduce the amount of circumstances that you can claim on because they want to have a cheaper premium. Because obviously, if you've got less opportunity to claim, your insurance should be cheaper. So what I would say to anybody buying insurance is, don't look at the price, look at the policy wording and what does it cover. And because that is really the thing that you're buying. In the event of a claim, you're going to want a policy wording that pays out in the scenarios that you think you're worried about when you're buying the insurance. Insurers will be keen to make sure that they are competitive, but competitive is really a secondary point. If you're not covered, it's going to be a disaster for you. So make sure you read that incredibly dry document. I know it's horrible, but please do.
I've had both professional and personal experience quite a lot with travel insurance. And I think that's the particular one from my perspective, that it's so easy to go and now get multiple quotes for travel insurance. And some of them appear really very, very cheap. And then when you read into what's covered under them, you get, okay, now it's clear why that one is cheap. And it's clear why I'm paying relatively more, 2, 3, 4 times more for that one. But if I get ill or injured and I need to be repatriated, the first one's not going to do that for me, and the other one will. So I completely agree with that. Also, that they're not the most gripping documents to read. But
we've got far more exciting things to read. I don't think they have, but they do. I accept that fully.
So if I'm starting my own career and I've heard about insurance as an industry and I'm thinking it might be an interesting place for me to go, I'm aware that it has relatively high job security. It pays well. I think I could build a career into it. And I somehow get face to face with the chief executive at NFU Mutual. What are you looking for in younger career starters? Is it a set of skills? Is it a set of attitudes? Is it a very specific set of exam passes? What people do you want to come into the industry?
Well, I think we need all kinds of people. And I mean, that we talk about diversity actively in our business because we recognize that people with all kind of attributes can bring something to our organization. You know, people who are very mathematical have a place. We have big finance departments. We have lots of actuaries, but also people who are very caring and have huge empathy. You can imagine if your house has burned down and you're somebody who doesn't really care about the person that you're speaking to on the other end of the phone, you're not going to be making their world better. So I think there's a place for everybody. Certainly, though we are, the things I look for is a real willingness to learn, great energy, a great work ethic, and ambition and imagination. I think those things are fantastic in young people. And certainly the ones that we bring on board into our business display those in spades. They challenge the status quo. They bring new thinking. The world is changing massively, and to have a new lens on the way we should be operating is a very welcome thing. So I think the young people that come to our organization are massively valued. Yeah, really good. So I think the other thing I would bear in mind is I think these days it's really important to take care of your health and your mental health as well. Certainly when you're starting out on a career, the way you get to the end of your career, the way you get to my age and still have a job, is to have looked after yourself and to have looked after your mental health, because so many people don't take those things seriously. And it can mean that, you know, you're just able to apply yourself properly to your role every day if you are taking care of yourself on a holistic basis.
Now, you lead now an organization of some 4,500 people, and you've been involved in trade organizations, sector bodies around insurance and finance as well. When did you first take your steps into becoming a leader? Oh, and were you even aware when you first became a leader that that's what you were doing?
Well, I think, in my early career, I didn't go to university. I decided that I was worried about learning for learning's sake. I was keen to make sure that I had an application for things I was learning. So that meant I entered the workforce at the age of 18 after A-levels, and I was doing relatively straightforward administrative work. And I had an economic challenge. You know, I needed to earn money. I had to pay rent. I was doing night school and everything, and taking exams and what have you. So I took a job at 21 in a sales capacity. So that was because apart from anything, I didn't have a car, and I wanted a car, and the sales job came with a car. So I think early on, I'd love to say my career was totally planned, but really it was out of economic need.
I love the practicality. Which job will give me a set of wheels?
Yeah, exactly. And also the commission that you earn as a salesperson reflected your work and effort. I love that. The more you put in, the more I got back. So it really, it had a really tight benefit between what I did and what I got paid. So that was really attractive. That was in wealth management before insurance. I was in wealth management. Um, then over time, I got into the cycle of sales, and sales is just great fun. For someone like me, you're meeting lots of people, you're talking to them about things that they need, you're shaping your products and services to fit their requirements, and you come away with an order. It's just fantastic. And I did that for 9 years. But the challenge after 9 years was that in a sales role, you get a target at the beginning of the year that feels impossible, by the way. It just feels, how are you ever going to do that? And by the end of the year, you've always done it, or certainly I did somehow. But it's a 1 year journey. You go back to zero again. So it's like constantly resetting your journey. And I was looking for something that was a bit more longer term. So I took a pay cut, a massive pay cut actually, to get into management, because I wanted to, I recognized that I had to go backwards to go forwards. And management, basically, the reason I took that job was because I went to the head office that I was working at the time with some ideas around how we could better organize the sales team around me. And they said, well, Nick, why didn't you do that? So I said, well, all right. I ended up moving to Bristol and took that on. And then I got, as you get into the communities where people can see, particularly with sales, you've got a huge experience of seeing what's out there as opposed to being fully academic. You've got a load of experience that you bring. And I was in high demand and gradually got sucked into strategy, leadership, and bigger and bigger problems that lasted longer and longer. And I'm still going. So that's the journey.
Philosophy of leadership or ethos or beliefs around it. How would you describe how you approach a leadership position?
Well, I did a bit of thinking. Before I became CEO, I went on a week's course, which was just to brush up and create a gap between the previous role and the new role. And obviously, as you change roles, it's worth taking a little bit of time out to reorientate your mind as to what kind of role you're stepping into and how you need to be in that role, because people will be looking at you from day one for leadership, effectively. And so I decided that it was a good idea to create a leadership style that I was going to execute in the role. And two words really embody the way I approach the CEO role today is one of kind and commercial. And what I mean by that is, kind means that if in doubt, be kind. So in other words, you get lots of challenges in my role where there is no right answer. But if you say, well, what's the kind answer? You find that actually the answer appears. It may not have nothing to do with finances. It's just what's right, what's kind, how do you do right by people? Because the reality is that at some point I'll retire and I want to be proud of what I've done during my life. And so if I've been kind along the way, the chances are I'll have a nice few smiles in my retirement around things that have been great to do. Then the other one, the kind and the commercial side, the commercial bit says you still have to have a business that's going to be here in 20 years' time, which means that if you just are kind without a commercial underlay that says, let's make sure we're not just burning money or giving money away or not being honest with the changes that need to happen in the company or anything like that. So it's switching between kind and commercial the whole time to make sure that you're on the right side of history, but also taking the difficult challenges that you need to take along the way as a leader.
I like that a lot, actually. The balance between kind and commercial. It's not only very simple to actually explain, it's also simple as a guiding set of principles when, as you say, often a chief executive has to make decisions and doesn't have clarity about whether there is a right or wrong decisions. They're just, better or worse ones. And that decision making, I always find interesting, people who've moved into leadership roles, because we learn a lot from our mistakes as well, or our errors or our fails or our things that didn't go well. And from your perspective, have there been events or times when the decisions you've made or the career choices have not worked out? They've not, in hindsight, been good ones, and what you've learned about yourself from that process?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've taken any. I'm not sure it's black and white. When you look back in the past and you think, well, was that the right move? Well, you'll never know. And my view of life is that you can almost make anything out of anything. So my first ever job was stacking shelves at Waitrose. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. There's fabulous fun to be had in everything that you do. So I'm not sure I'd recognize a wrong turn from a career perspective. I definitely, you make some decisions that turn out to be not optimal. That's perhaps a better way of putting it. But then, suboptimal decisions. But the beauty about, as long as you're not full of pride and overly pompous about it, you can change them. You just move left and right until they become better decisions. And I find that with career or company, try to make decisions, but not hang on to them as if they're so right. If they turn out to be less right than you thought, well, do something slightly different and just keep moving. So it's that it all goes wrong if you hold on to something as absolutely right. And when you get to my age, you realize that there's a much greater amount of gray in the world than you ever realized. And you end up steering through an ocean of imperfection just to try and make sure that you get to the other side in one shape.
And certainly don't overlook the opportunity to work in a supermarket. You did your Waitrose. I did my Sainsbury's for many, many years, actually, during college and start of university, all sorts of jobs, but learned a lot from a lot of people, and it paid my way through sort of later teenage years and early 20s. So I also really enjoyed most of it, actually, as well. I actually particularly enjoyed that once I'd been there long enough and was trusted to actually do relatively senior roles for someone who was actually a student still. And I was helping with the HR side. And there was a friend of mine who'd worked there, but then had gone and hadn't worked there very long at all. And I'd always wondered why. And so I got out his HR file and it had his name on it. And next to it was very clearly written, "Do not re-employ." So I don't know what he did, but they were pretty firm that they didn't want him back after that. And your own sort of routes forward from here, you said about what you want to look back with sort of some pride in what you've done, with knowing that you have been kind to it. What are the changes we're going to see in the wider insurance industry that are going to relate to sort of changing career opportunities, new things happening? What are the changes you see coming over the next few years?
I think the big thing, and this is probably a bit of a cliche, but I think it's the role that artificial intelligence will play in our industry. It certainly won't remove people. I think the idea that you could ring up a robot when your house has burned down and get empathy and understanding, I think we're many, many years away from that. I think you still need people at critical points, definitely. So, our insurance industry will still be full of people. But I think the role that AI has to play in the industry is to help those people make better decisions. So better underwriting decisions where they're assessing the risk, better pricing decisions where they're putting more accurate prices on risks, better estimates of the costs of repairing vehicles, or there's so many opportunities for the way AI can improve the way we do things as an organization, that will transform our industry over the next 10 years. It will be absolutely amazing.
And do you think AI is going to start to make a decision about whether my medical insurance will cover my next operation or something?
Well, yes, absolutely. Already we're putting our underwriting manual, which has 36,000 pages, into a large language model, And we've got to the point now where our agents who will be sitting in front of a customer can ask it a question and it will tell them the answer. So it won't be long before we tip the claims manual into a large language model, and we have the same kind of questions. It massively democratizes knowledge because people can just ask these computer systems questions as opposed to having to know which page to go to and how to interpret it. You can explore in a much more intuitive way, which means it's going to be a lot easier for all kinds of people to access this information.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for your time today. We've covered so much in a short conversation. Insurance sector is huge in the UK. It's very important both to individuals, to business, and also to the wider economy. As we discussed earlier, the UK insurance market is one of the biggest in the world. So it is certainly a career route for people to think about it because the sheer variety of roles going on in there. You also mentioned not just the sort of the financial, the statistical roles that obviously exist, but also the need for people to be there to help other people at a time when they really need it the most, and the sort of empathy that goes with that, and how amongst career starters you're looking for energy, for a willingness to learn, for new thinking to be brought into that. And then we touched upon your own thoughts about leadership, about being kind and being commercial, and also what I thought was important before that was that step you took to reorientate between roles. And I think it's too easy for people to sometimes think, right, I'm moving from one position into a more senior management position, I will just act the same. But the benefit of taking a pause to go, actually, no, now I'm expected to lead others. Therefore, it's different. Therefore, I have to think about how I'm going to approach that. So much covered in a short space of time, and lifted the lid on an industry that people won't know a lot about sometimes, but is important to them and has incredible career opportunities. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today and for unwrapping your career.
No, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
This podcast is sponsored by We Are Futures. To find out more about We Are Futures and how we can introduce your brand, business, or organisation to the mass markets of tomorrow, visit www.wearefutures.com. Make sure to search for Careers Unwrapped in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Remember to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at We Are Futures, thanks for listening.